Week 7, lesson 1. Okay, so this lesson is on something called factorials. It's one of my favorite lessons to do in person because I actually scream at you. Those of you that have me before will remember this. It doesn't come across quite the same way in video, and I apologize for that. But here is the definition. So you're going to see a number with an exclamation point after it. And the way to do this computation is you start with that number, and then you multiply it by a number less than it, and a number less than it, and a number less than it, until you get all the way down to 1. And the reason that there's all these dots is because it's kind of hard to tell how many numbers there's going to be until you know exactly what n is. So, for example, on this one, this is 4 factorial, so you start with the 4, and then a number that is exactly 1 less than that is 3, and 1 less than that is 2, and 1 less than that is 1, and when you get to 1 is when you stop, and you actually do that multiplication, and you get 24. There is a factorial button on your calculator. I may or may not tell you where that is. It's actually under a probability menu. I'm not going to show you how to do it, though, because for these notes, I want you to get used to doing them by hand, because if you look further down, we end up having to do these with letters, and the button doesn't do letters. So this is why I want you to get comfortable doing them with the long way, just temporarily. Okay, so for this one, the next one, 7 factorial would be 7 times 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. And 5 factorial is 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. And you can see that this and this cancel out, and the answer is 42. But I'm hoping that you'll also see that you don't have to necessarily write it all the way out, right? I can shorten that up. I can just write it as 7 times 6 times 5 factorial and put that over 5 factorial and then have those cancel out, right? Because otherwise, I mean, if these numbers are big, like what if it was like 100 factorial? You don't have to write that whole thing out, right? Just write enough of it out that you need. So like on this example, I'm going to do the bottom first. 5 times 4 times 3 factorial, and on the top, all I have to write is the 3 factorial. Those cancel, and when you multiply what's left, we get 1 over 20. Okay, so kind of the key is looking for the larger number. If you can find the larger number, start with that. So I'm going to do 10 times 9 times 8 factorial. On the top, I'm going to write that as 8 factorial so I can get it to cancel. And then 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. Okay, so now that cancels with that. 2 goes into 10 5 times. 3 goes into 9 3 times. And I think that might be it. And an answer here of 4/15. Okay, let me scoot this up a little bit. All right, so let's start with the bigger numbers. I'm going to start with this 10. 10 times 9 times 8 times 7 factorial. And then on the top, I'm going to write 7 factorial. And then I'm going to start writing this out and put 6 times 5 factorial. And then I'll write that one, 5 factorial. And you can see this and this cancel with this and this. So my numerator is a 1, and my denominator with my handy-dandy calculator is 4,320. Okay, now we're going to apply that same exact concept on this problem, okay? So I want to see if I can find the number that is larger. So is n or is n plus 1 the larger? Well, it's the n plus 1, so I'm going to write that as n plus 1. 1 less than that would be n, and I can go ahead and write that as factorial. Here's my denominator, and don't forget to bring over this little guy, right? It doesn't have a factorial or anything on it, but it's still up there. So now this cancels with this, and my answer can either be n times n plus 1, or if you want to distribute, feel free and get n squared plus n. Okay, now this last one, I'm going to make sure I have enough room, so I'm going to kind of make it a little bigger. There we go. Okay, so this one has a subtraction in it, which is a first. Like, you haven't seen this before. So let me start sort of writing this out just a little bit, okay? So, and I'm going to do them in 3 different colors so you can see it. So I'm going to do this one in red. So this is n times n minus 1 times n minus 2 times n minus 3, and that keeps going. Okay, that's going to be multiplied by this one, which I'm going to do in pink, which is n minus 1 times n minus 2 times n minus 3, and that keeps going. All over, and I'll do the bottom in blue, this is n plus 1 times n minus 1 times n minus 2, and that keeps going. Okay, so there are 3 terms here. Okay, there's the red and the pink on top and blue on the bottom. So out of the top, I'm hoping that you can see that both of these terms have an n minus 1 factorial in them. So I'm going to factor out n minus 1 factorial. Okay, now when you factor out, you have to be left with stuff, right? So if I take it out of here, I'm left with n. And if I take it out of here, I'm left with minus 1. And in the denominator, I have, right about here, right? And continuing on, there is an n minus 1 factorial. So I've got n plus 1 times n minus 1 factorial. So this cancels with this. My numerator is n minus 1, and my denominator is n times n plus 1.